Hi, this is Laura with Potpourri of Life. Tonight what I'm doing is that I am making some molasses cookies. My husband's been asking for hermits or molasses cookies, and I haven't yet had a chance to do that. And part of the reason is I don't make cookies as often as he might like, or as much as I might during the holiday seasons. And so usually when I make cookies, it's usually because I know the grandkids are coming over, or it's been a while since I've made any for him. So what I first have done is I put 3.5 cups of all-purpose gluten-free flour in the bowl. And right now I am measuring out some brown sugar. And the nice thing about brown sugar is it is made with molasses. Brown sugar is made with molasses, which is kind of a neat thing to know for those who did not know. So if you ever run out of brown sugar, just take a cup of sugar, organic is better, and a tablespoon of molasses, and you've got brown sugar. That's just a little tip for those who did not know. So I'm going to put these things out of my way. So far I've got the gluten-free flour in there, and I got the brown sugar. And I got those in there, and I kind of tend to put those in together often. And I'm going to try to have you see what I am doing instead of having to look at my tired face because it is late. The next thing I'm going to do is, maybe you have to look at me, I'm sorry. The next thing that I'm going to put in, the recipe calls for shortening. I don't use shortening anymore. I used to a long time ago. And I always kept it on hand because the one cookie that I always made was snickerdoodles, and the only thing that made snickerdoodles taste good was shortening. Well, when I learned more about shortening versus lard, I started using the lard. So the lard gives it a nice flavor. It's more natural. It doesn't have all the added stuff in it. This is some lard I made a couple weeks ago, and it has the seal on it. Let me get my handy dandy jar opener. By doing that, it doesn't leave dents in the jars that we sometimes have, and it allows me to reuse those lids for other purposes, not necessarily for canning. But we went through a year there where we couldn't get lids, and so I figured out how can I do this. And one of the ways to do that is to boil it, whereas you can see the indent there. If I boil this, I can reuse it. But typically right now what I do is I just I don't use it for that. But anyways, let's move on. So it's asking for a 1/4 cup plus 1 tablespoon of shortening. And I don't know if you guys are keeping track of this. And I have only a 1/2 cup measure here. So this is 1/3 cup, so I'm going to do just a little bit less because it says a 1/4 cup plus a tablespoon. Now I just took this lard out of the refrigerator, and I've used shortening before, and this comes out much nicer. It almost looks like coconut oil. And what I did was I got some back fat and I melted it down, and I made this beautiful lard that I've used in a couple things. Now it said a 1/4 cup plus a tablespoon, so I'm not going to fill it since this is a 1/3 cup measure, and I don't know where I put my 1/4 cup. That sometimes happens. So I'm going to put that in. If I need more moisture, I'll certainly add a little bit more of that. But I think this is going to be more than enough. Okay, that can go there. So I've got the 1/4 cup shortening plus the tablespoon. I've got the 1/2 cup of brown sugar, and I got my 3.5 cups of gluten-free flour. And I'm just going to mix this in a little bit, and I'm going to add in, this is going to seem like a surprise because nobody puts this much in cookies typically. It's usually a tablespoon, a teaspoon or something. This particular recipe requires a tablespoon of baking soda. So that's, and it's coming from a book that has been in my family for a while. So because it's not quite a tablespoon, but I'm putting that tablespoon in there. And yeah, I was tempted to say, no, it's got to be written wrong. But it's been a while since I've made these, so I'm going to go with how it's telling me to do this. Sorry, I keep getting distracted here. Then some salt. This is real salt. It's not your typical table salt. And I just take it from the big canister and I put it in this. It says a half teaspoon of salt. Sorry, that's how I measure my stuff. So it's kind of like 2 pinches for me. Alright. Then what I do is I'm going to start mixing this up. Getting the lard in there. I've got the brown sugar. The next two things that need to come in here are cold water, which I've already measured, and I need a cup of molasses. Almost like honey. And I'm not going to use any more of that, so molasses has so many nutrients, and one of the reasons that I like to use it more so now is because of the calcium that's in it. It's low sodium, and it's a sweetener. Molasses used to be the original sweetener years ago. You know, we didn't. Today we have all these other sweeteners available to us, and I use. It calls for. In this book, it recommends the light brown or the light molasses or the dark molasses. I use the unsulphured, and it's not as sweet as the other two, as I find that it's healthier for you. It just doesn't have all the extra stuff with it. This is just pure molasses, and if you've ever bought the grandma's, that's what it is. It's unsulphured, original, gold standard since 1890. But that's what I use for my molasses. It's starting to smell very molassy like. Alright, so I'm going to blend all that in. Yes, I could be using my mixer. There's a reason that I'm hand mixing things nowadays. Don't get me wrong, I love my mixer. I've got a KitchenAid mixer and I love it. And I used it a lot 10, 12 years ago when I was diagnosed with Lyme, because I just didn't have the strength to sit here and mix things. This here is the half cup of cold water. I use filtered water. I'm going to just put a little bit in at a time. Cover the... Now you'll notice that the only other sugar I put in there was just a half a cup of brown sugar. Now, another thing, my husband doesn't necessarily like much that's gluten-free, but what I've been doing is I've been working with the gluten-free flour and how can I make it better. And this one, I don't really need to do much with this recipe because it's going to be fine. I believe that it's going to be fine. Okay, so that's the water. I just find that the more I mix, I'm using more muscles, and one of the goals is to, next year, when I go back to get tested with my DEXA, that it comes back that I have reversed the osteoporosis. So in doing that, everything I do, I try to incorporate more exercise. Does that mean I'll never use my mixer again? No, that's not true. I plan on using the mixer as needed, but right now, for a batch of cookies, this is what I'm going to do. Okay, there's a little bit more flour left down there that still mixing. And a lot of times with gluten-free flour, if you don't get a nice blend, you can end up with kind of like a crusty film. It's like it doesn't get mixed in. But what I've got here for a mixture, and I'm not sure if this was one I mixed up myself, or I think it's one that I bought that was all-purpose. You can tell when you're having problems with your gluten-free flour because it will stick to the sides. Now, one thing, I don't know if you noticed, there's no eggs in this recipe. And that is not a bad thing either, because although eggs are good for us, I believe, for me, I really shouldn't be eating much for eggs, but if I have the farm fresh, I do much better. Don't ask me why. But I talked to my allergist about it, and she goes, Laura, as long as you're baking these things, you'll be okay. But there's a few things I can't eat at all. So I'm just stirring extra because I see clumps. And it's not flour. And that's it. Now, yes, I'm going to take it. And it's sweet enough. It doesn't taste gluten-free at all. So I know my husband's going to like it. So let me wash my hands again. And the stove is all set. Now, some molasses cookies, they like you to put sugar on. And I don't know, I just don't like to if I can avoid it. I know that might sound mean to some people. And I mean, I spoil my husband quite a bit. I bake him a lot of stuff. But just because I bake him a lot doesn't mean that I have to add extra. Is that too bright? I hope not. I just can't see over there. He knows that I'm just trying to keep him healthy. Now, if I wasn't around, the cookie of choice that he would make would be chocolate chip first. And the second would be, let's see, I think he would do the snickerdoodles because he's like those. And he will eat oatmeal cookies, but he won't eat them. I mean, he won't make them. Now, one thing I forgot that I was going to add, but I didn't, and that's okay. I'll just throw a handful into his lunch, is sometimes what I do with these cookies is I'll add like half a cup of raisins in here, just for a little bit extra. And sometimes I use a small cookie ice cream scoop, but the type of dough this is, I decided I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just use the spoon method that I've always done all my life. I have started using the scoop that makes huge cookies, so now I don't do that too much. No, that's a lie. I do use it like when I make his chocolate chip cookies and when I know the grandkids are coming over. So this is going to go into the oven at 375. And it says to bake 10 to 12 minutes. Because I've preheated it, I'm going to stick with the 10 minutes. Oftentimes, if I've preheated it and it's not quite there, I'll have to do the 12 minutes, the first batch, you know, the first try. But this one I don't. So I apologize. I see that you're getting a glare. So this will go in for 10. And although I do have 2 trays that I can put this in, you know, I could put 2 trays in at once, and it would save our gas. I'm trying to think of ways to save our energy right now. I still like to do 1 tray at a time because that way I know they're getting cooked the same. I will be, I worked on a video, and since, as you know, for those who have been following me, I don't have the capabilities yet. I don't have the right program to do cut and paste. So I did start a video on the benefits of molasses, and I'm going to finish working on that. There was a few things that it's like, oh, I should have said this, because I know my videos aren't perfect. But I'm trying to figure out, I don't know anybody who's perfect. So I don't want to worry too much about it, but there were some things I wanted to mention that I didn't get in there. We'll get this batch done, and then I'm going to show you the recipe book that I use. It has been, my mother's had it when I was a little girl, so it's a cookbook we've had forever. And then, let's see, I went back and I visited, and she gave me the cookbook. So I was really excited about that. But it's old. And I don't use everything exactly in any recipe that are in these books, because these are older books. They're not from the 1800s or the early 1900s. I don't even know where this book was from. So while we're waiting for the other batch to finish, this is the book I use. And this one, oh goodness, how old is this one? Let me see if I can. I know this is the first edition, first printing. 1963, I was 3 years old. But this was my go-to book when I was learning to bake cookies and stuff. So, and I love it because it has tons of cookies in here. Now, no, I have not baked all of them. I have some favorites and stuff. But I have changed up how I've baked over the last 10-12 years. I've changed how I bake and how I cook and stuff. And I think a lot of people have over the last 10-20 years. There's so many things that we've learned that we gained, you know. So, all right, so I don't need this recipe anymore. So it says that it's going to make about 4 dozen cookies. It might make more because of the size that I'm making. So I want something I read with one of the other books, one of the other recipes. The really cool thing about this book, it gives you some history. Like there's something on nutmeg, there's something on buttermilk, ginger, raisins, and notes on molasses. And I'm going to include this in my molasses video that I put together for you. It says, and molasses was the chief sweetener in the American homes in the 18th century and early 19th century. It was the only sweetener, really. I'm sure that they had honey, and I'm sure that they had maple syrup. So every cabin and covered wagon had its molasses jug. I mean, when I grew up, we had a molasses jug, and I have molasses jugs downstairs too. And I just fill these jars up. I have a couple of these, and I just fill them up because of how I use that. I actually put a tablespoon of that in my coffee every morning. and that'll be in my molasses video. I know you guys might think I'm weird, but it makes a difference. Alright, so every wagon had its molasses jug. It was used in bacon and eaten on flapjacks and on bread. So they used it to spread on their toast and so forth. Today, molasses is used more for its rich, mellow flavor than for its sweetening. Some people do not like molasses. My husband can't take, like if I wasn't having any coffee, I would still take a tablespoon of molasses. And he thinks I'm disgusting to do that. He thinks it's gross. No, he doesn't think I'm disgusting. He just thinks it's gross. Because he doesn't like it straight. And part of the reason is it has a bitter flavor. And those of us who don't eat a lot of sugar, it's really sweet to us. So, the recipes in this book use light molasses unless dark molasses specifies. But light molasses comes from the first boil of the sugarcane stalks, and the dark comes from the second. I will go into what the unsulphured stuff is in the molasses video that I'm putting together. But I just wanted to share a recipe that uses molasses. And I don't know any household who doesn't have molasses in their... I can't say that. I grew up and molasses was a staple for baking and stuff. I just can't imagine somebody not having molasses in their house. And I'm hoping if you're watching this, you decide, oh, I might try that. So we will see. I did not set up the timer. See what happens when I talk? So I think I've been talking for... I'm going to give it 5 minutes because I think 5 minutes will do it. So once that comes out, we'll let that cool while the other one goes in there. And I won't have you sit and watch me make all 4 dozen or maybe 5 dozen. But I just wanted to get it out so I could show you how it came out. And I will do a taste test. Sorry, there's no taste division here. But you'll be able to tell from my expression how good it is. I promise I won't fake the expression. It's been a while since I've made these cookies, but I could tell that it's been made because there's all kinds of marks in my book. Yeah, I have sticky notes everywhere and little other notes, but you can tell the recipes. Oh, I had a Shaw's receipt here from 2016. Nah. 2019. That 16 was another number that was in there. So that wasn't too long ago. Let's see. So I just, if I don't have a sticky note, I just take whatever's there. I mean, I don't need my receipts once I've used it. But there's, I even have notes in here for my husband. Is this my husband's writing? That's not his writing. That looks like it's my mother's writing, but no, I think it's mine. My mother and I had similar writing. But in here, I've already got notes. Use gluten-free without raisins, and I put a check mark. Without the raisin, it tasted good. A check mark if it tasted good. So I think the reason I like this book is that I can make gluten-free goodies and feel good about serving them to the family. But I know there's some recipes here that I use. I should be able to just open up this book. You see all those marks there? There's hermits and cinnamon jumbles. But I know there's... My snickerdoodles are in this book. This snickerdoodles recipe is... I don't do any other recipe for snickerdoodles. This is my go-to. I don't know where it is, but it doesn't matter because you can't see it. But I like this book, and I do know that there's new editions out there. I'm not making any money by promoting this. I'm just chatting until that first batch of cookies come out. But that's where I get some of my recipes from. It's from old cookbooks and from new cookbooks from the internet and stuff like that. But I find that The older cookbooks are user-friendly for me to alter recipes so that I can create gluten-free, dairy-free, egg-free type recipes. And yes, I do include eggs and stuff as long as I have farm fresh, but there's alternates to using eggs as well. So, that's something I do as well just to get it. And as long as it comes out with this nice cream texture, that will make it's a nice cookie dough. And I was really surprised. I forgot about how they require 1 tablespoon of baking soda, because typically that's not how much you get. Typically you get, let's see if I find a recipe with it, 1 teaspoon. And I think typically it's 1 teaspoon in most. So when it said 1 tablespoon, we stop and think, oh, that's like a typo error, right? Or typo. And but it's not. And I could tell by when I tasted this, it doesn't taste baking soda like. So hold on, it looks like we got some time. Now I'm going to let this cool for a minute. Now, parchment paper is a product we're all comfortable using, but I don't always use it. I find, sorry, I don't like the way the flash goes behind I just needed it so I could see what I was doing. Blind in the dark. I think parchment paper is a really nice additive. Yet it's not necessary. For years I've never used parchment paper. Most of the cookies I make, I don't even need to grease the cookie sheets. And the ones that we have, it has kind of a nice, it balances the heat, so I don't really have a burning issue. But if you have burning issues because of the type of cookie sheets you have, you can always use some sort, just take a little bit of the lard, just a little bit, you don't need much. A little bit of butter, a little bit of coconut oil. You don't need to use the sprays, but if that's what you have, you can use it. I prefer to use these 3 items because I find that they're healthier if I need to grease an item. Do I have the sprays? Yeah, there's somebody in this household that likes the sprays, so I have them here for him, but I tend to use most often the coconut oil, the lard, and the lard is new because I just made it a few weeks ago, and I just love how things are coming out because I'll do stir fries with it. I will do, that's all I've done so far because I've only had it for 2 weeks, and I have not, this is the first time I've baked cookies with it, but I made banana bread with it. It was amazing, and I think, and I'm not sure, but I think that's what's making the gluten-free products even better. So I'm going to keep trying this, and I'm going to go on, and this is going to be my go-to. I will be using lard. I'll be making more lard, and it's not that hard to do. It's time consuming because you got to watch it. So let's see where this cookie is. As you can see, the parchment paper allows me to easily remove cookies, and I'll be putting these on a rack soon. I just like to make sure that they can move a little bit so that they can, ooh, which cookie do I want? Alright, so it has a nice brown bottom. It looks pretty good. And then I'm going to break, it's really hot, so I think it's too early. But it has a nice chewy look to it. Not chewy where you're going to be sitting there chewing it too long. I think it's going to taste really good. You ready for this? It's still hot. I might have a hard time letting my husband have these. These are pretty good. But since I made them for him, this is the only cookie I'm going to get. And that's fine, because what I'll do is once they're cooled, I'll put them in a cookie jar so that he can have it. And what I do is I hide the cookie jar on me. Or I'll put it in a container. I'll say, hide this. So I don't know where he puts it. Typically I can find it if I really want it, but I might really want this. Now, the recipe does not tell me how many calories or how many... Sorry. It doesn't tell me any of that. I don't even know if I can find that recipe again. No. It doesn't tell me calories. It doesn't tell me nutrients. It doesn't tell me any of that. But molasses has some good nutrients in it. And I'll be sharing this on the other one. There is 60 calories in a tablespoon. And I put a whole cup in here. So right there you know it's not going to be a low calorie snack. Very little sodium, 5 milligrams in a tablespoon. A serving size is a tablespoon. Let's see, there's fiber, there's some carbs in it. The molasses is a sugar, and it has 15 grams. So if we're going to count sugar, there's no protein, as we probably can assume. There's calcium, 30 milligrams. There's some iron, magnesium, and let's see, it says, and vitamin. It does not have a significant amount. Part of the reason I added molasses to my baking more, first of all, I wanted my husband to have health, and I do make him like hermits and that kind of stuff with raisins. But part of the reason that I put the molasses in my cookies, and I now take at least a tablespoon a day, whether if I don't have coffee that day, I'll take a tablespoon, is because of the calcium. And I am focused on bone health. I think I shared that at the very onset. And if I can make a treat for both of us, I mean, we're both getting older, and our bones, there's all kinds of stuff that's going on with our bodies. We don't want to admit it, but it's there. So that's why I've incorporated that. Do I make him other cookies? I think I've shared. Yeah, I do. I just don't bake a lot, as much as I used to. Although with the videos now, I might have to. Plus, he likes having a little bit of treat. He just feels like, oh, she cared enough to bake for me. But I don't make big batches like I did when the kids were young. Oh my goodness, I would have to double the batches when I baked for them. But anyways, I'm rambling, and it's late, and I want to get these done. I want to get them cooled so I can go get my rest. But I hope you enjoyed that recipe. I hope that you learned a little bit of molasses. Maybe it's a teaser for what I'm going to share about what molasses can do, the benefits of using molasses in our foods. And but other than that, I hope that you're having a good night or a restful night, and we will talk to you soon. God bless.